Let's move on into our next session, which is Skillset Versatility. And for this session, we have three studio agency owners that will be talking about the different ways to navigate an agency, if you should work with different skills, if you should specialize on something different. And I'll start with introducing them. So first we have Pete Sena, who's the founder and chief creative officer of Digital Surgeons. Pete owns Digital Surgeons, which is a creative consultancy that helps brands sparks and create new opportunities for growth. He has built and led cross-functional teams that have delivered a number of successful, award-winning multi-channel programs and activations, ranging in scale from venture-backed startups to Fortune 50 organizations. Pete prides himself on partnering with CEOs, CMOs, and creative leaders to help them set, plan, and achieve their visions. So Pete owns the agency where Andrea works, which is the case study that you guys were able to see during the 1 o'clock session. Then we have David Gurr, who is the owner and principal of his own studio, Studio Gurr. He creates immersive brand experiences that span across logo systems, packaging, print collateral, signage, and digital design for various clients and around the globe. Aside from his commercial work, David is also passionate about educating designers and helping them achieve their full functional as creatives and business owners, because we're more than just freelancers. David has also lectured across the nation on branding, design, and marketing to students, practicing designers, and clients alike. And we also have Stewart, who is the founder of Ingenuity Design, who is a strategic branding and communications agency specializing in employee experiences. With over 20 plus years of experience, Greg treats every project as an opportunity to win the hearts and minds of the audience. And that commitment pays off even today because of his excellent work with everyone. For that reason, it's not a surprise that Ingenuity has many lasting and referral-based client relationships. These clients include eBay, Splunk, Thumbtack, Visa, TD Bank, and Columbia University. So I feel like I'm speeding a little bit, just trying to catch up from the session and making sure that we don't lose any time. But I want to jump into the conversation and start with you, Pete. And let's talk a little bit about, with you being an agency owner, what type of skills would you like to see from someone who is just starting out in the business and is about to graduate or has recently graduated?
I love that question, Melanie. Thanks so much and thanks for everybody for being here. Love doing this stuff. I obviously look forward to a time when we can all hopefully be vaccinated and in person together, because gotta love this Brady Bunch looking thing I've got here on my giant 2 screens. So to answer your question, Melanie, I think the most important skill that I see in any candidate of any level or any skill set, I would say, is the ability to both learn and unlearn. And I want to put more of a focus today on actually unlearning. From my perspective, something that Jamie, who leads up recruiting for our agency, hi Jamie, talk to her, she's awesome if you haven't already. So Jamie talks a lot about this concept, which we've really been embodying for a period of time, called high velocity learners. And for me, it's people who are not afraid to jump in and teach themselves something new. I think that that's something that is a really, really underexplored skill. I think a lot of schools teach great theory, they teach a lot of the great buzzwords, but they often fail to really dig into teaching people how to actually seek out and find a problem and solve it. And there's lots of buzzwords like design thinking and UX and all these different skill sets. But I think that the theories sort of die in the books, and where the magic happens is when people are willing to jump in. And I think that irrespective of background, age, or skill set, I think that that's something that everyone really needs the ability to possess.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Pete. Jumping into that a little bit, Greg, at your firm, what should a newly hired designer expect to be doing?
Thank you. We're a small company, so we actually expect a lot. We are really transparent. It's not a siloed environment where you'll just be getting the small, easy one-off projects and be doing the same thing every day. So we look for portfolios that do the same thing, right? There's an experimental aspect to portfolios that we look for, and because we expect the same from what somebody is going to bring to our agency. That's wearing different hats. That could be helping with a motion design concept, to a brochure, to a logo, and kind of everything in between. So knowing that people come from school that have a set of classes that are mandated, we expect a diverse portfolio anyway. So it's really kind of getting those passion seekers that have had internships and played with their own freelance design, that really kind of show like where they really want to go, that we also look for, because that just allows us to know that there's like a little bit of a niche for photography or for motion or for UX or whatever, that we can continually dabble in.
Okay, great. And I will segue into that to you, David. What do you think are the skills designers are not learning in school right now? Or something that you really wish you would have learned before opening your own studio?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think something to remember too is, the three of us all have different, kind of positioned agencies and different, probably perspectives on how we do things. So, from my perspective, I think what I think a lot of students could learn that they're not learning is from a business side of design, to think about, when you're working with these different agencies, or if you're working with your own clients, how to communicate what you want to, your design, to communicate the presentation, to really articulate what you're trying to say visually. And I think a lot of students, they just kind of, here it is, or they like talk too much about things that aren't really important to the design. Oh, but this is, I had to go around this. Oh, I had to do this, instead of just focusing on, what the design's saying.
Okay, so I love this panel because you all have, like you mentioned, you all have very different areas for your businesses and very different skill sets, right? So Greg is looking for people that have different skills that can dabble in different things. But you, David, you're a little bit more specialized, and you focus a little bit more on branding. But being a business owner, how do you handle some of that versatility, and how do you handle those different skills that you have to tackle in it?
Yeah, so, we're definitely more of a design studio. I think something that's also important to remember for students is, there's kind of like marketing agencies that are kind of both design and advertising. Then there's advertising agencies that are really just advertising. I wouldn't really say they're doing as much design. And then there's design studios, and I would classify, my studio as a design studio, where we're doing a lot of mostly branding with an emphasis on print and packaging. We're not doing as much digital work. We're not really doing marketing, social media, anything like that. And so, I kind of build projects with specialists. I kind of think of it as like a band, right? Like a really tight 4 or 5 piece band. You want someone that's an amazing drummer. You want someone that's an amazing guitarist. In the same way, if I have a project that requires motion design, I will seek out a specialist rather than hire someone that just can get it done. I want to work with people that are really talented. And that's kind of how we do things around here.
Okay, so Pete, can you jump into that and give us a little bit of your opinion about how you feel of having designers with a lot of versatility in their skills?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that, we say this, it's literally on the wall of our building. It's like on the wall, it says change is the only constant. And I'm a firm believer that something is always changing. One of the things that's really hard for us as we're looking for creative leaders, and we're always hiring, so see Jamie, but plugs aside, I think the challenge we see is that a lot of people, once they get past a certain level in their career, they really lose touch with really any of the skills that got them there. So one of the things that I really pride myself on as a creative leader is that I still have the ability to design, and not just talk about design, but actually open the tools and be able to create things. So, on any given day, I've got just as many of the tools open that my teams do. And I think that while I try to empower the teams to really have their specific craft and whatever that specialization might look like, I do think that being able to always apply the different skills that come with that cross type of disciplinary training is really important. So when I think about what design's problem solving, right? So whether you are a UI UX firm that's doing internal branding like Greg's firm is doing, or whether you're doing print and package design like David's doing, or designing demand and growth for companies like Digital Surgeons is doing, I think the one thing that all those things have in common is that they're solving a problem. So I think it's really important to understand the context, the medium, and understand, like the old adage is the medium is the message and the message is the medium. So if I'm doing a motion design piece that is going to run on a billboard or on this backdrop in between the sessions, I have to understand my audience. I have to understand who I'm designing for, the problem I'm designing for. And then I think, like David said, I think the challenge is when some people try to spread themselves too thin. I look for what I call T-shaped employees, and it comes from the software company Valve. And it sort of looks like a T, like I'm sort of zoomed in here, but the arms are out. So you've got that long amount of depth, which is the really deep subject matter expertise. I think some people tend to get too shallow. So they're sort of 2 inches deep and 100 feet wide, and that doesn't help anyone. But at the same time, I think that if you are able to specialize in multiple things, I've heard the term M-shaped employees or T-shaped employees, there's lots of other buzzwords out there, but really just to sum it up, I think that understanding the different craft and the different mediums is really critical, and how those things all apply to one another. So a good example is in our world, we have some teams who are really focused on the research and insight side of user experience. So they're really focused on understanding the behaviors of the customer and the consumer and the person using the thing, whether that thing is an app or an interface or a physical product like we design, or if they're understanding the journey that person goes through. So that person is someone that, sure, they can wireframe, they've got some interface design skills, but they're not going to have like what a 10, 12, 15-year visual designer is going to have to be able to create that aesthetic integrity. So what I tend to tell people is, like, understand, where do you tend to fit in? Do you see yourself going down the individual contributor track where you're going to be just contributing to one aspect of a project? Or do you see yourself managing teams and people? And I think that one of the things that is, in my opinion, a sin in our industry is that as you get more senior, people get pushed into management, and not all great practitioners should be managers. So I see that a lot, is that in order to become a creative director, in order to make more money and kind of move up the proverbial ladder, you have to manage people. That's not true. And I think what a lot of the large organizations like Facebook and Google and even Digital Surgeons to a certain degree have learned is that understanding where someone wants to go with their career, maybe they don't want to get too wide. Maybe they want to stay specialized. So I think that the thing I would offer everyone is self-awareness is the number one skill that you should have. Know what you do want to do and what you don't want to do, and then lean into that really hard. And what that might turn into for you is a career where, like David said, you're highly specialized in a very specific area. He's going to be the best at printing and packaging, right? I would be a fool to think that I'm going to be able to do that as good as he can. But the same way that on the flip side, he might not be focused on UI UX per se. So he would probably tap in some of our user experience designers. So I hope that answers the question, Melanie, but I think just summing it all up, know who you are and then understand where you're going. And that's going to dictate what you do or don't spend your time and energy doing.
Okay, sorry about that. I was muted. Very well said, Pete. And then jumping into it, I would like to ask David and Greg, sort of like advice for students that are afraid to jump into a different type of role, right? Because there are people that when they're graduating, or well, is it supposed to be a junior position, or is it a graphic design position? Like the levels that the industry sort of like outlines sometimes make students a little bit nervous, or they immediately go and say like, well, I'm not gonna be able to be a creative director. And my response is like, well, you don't really know until you try it, because you turn out that you may be great at it and you're just sort of like psyching yourself out of it. So is there any advice that you guys give students to not be afraid to try different things and try different work settings? Go for it, Pete.
Oh, who's starting?
No, go, David.
Sorry. No, I mean, I think, for me, like when I started out, it was just like, I wanted to be everywhere, network, rub shoulders with these people. I was never afraid to work for all these different agencies. I never had a full-time job. I moved around different contracts. Sometimes I'd work for a couple of agencies at one time. And that opportunity I got to learn a lot from each studio. I got to meet all these really interesting people that have careers that span 20, 30, 40 years. Well, maybe not 40, I don't know. And, learn all these different processes. And so I would say, definitely don't be afraid. I think, if you're just starting out, you're probably not going to apply for a creative director position, obviously, but, looking at the experience, don't be afraid if you're a little short. If you can find some way in, you can bypass some of those requirements sometimes. And that's just by knowing the right people, or, picking up the phone and calling rather than going through the resume form, finding unique ways to stand out, and, sending a gift if someone helps you out. Like, think about these things that give you a leg up, an opportunity to, to not fearfully move forward, but to confidently go forward.
Cool. I'll say one, piggybacking off what Pete said, is a self-awareness. Kind of know where you are as well. There's something to be said about not applying for roles that are too far out of your league. One is because I also look at resumes that come in and I completely ignore them if they're, looking, if we have a design role and we are getting a resume that has nothing to do with it, or it's a way too, high level or even low level. And so we ignore it. And so the more we see your name, whether because it's you're applying for a job that's not suited to you, the more we're likely to ignore it the next time. We're like, oh, this person doesn't know what they're applying for and doesn't know and have that self-awareness as well. So there's a little bit of self-constraint that you need to do as well, to just know, like, okay, it says 1 to 3 years experience. I have 1, or I have a half year plus an internship. Like, that to me is okay. Like, that's kind of fit in that book. But if it says 7+ years experience and you are kind of 1.5, you have to just have that self-awareness to know, like, we're just gonna, kind of stop you at the door, or before even the door opens at that point. And I would say all studios, firms, agencies should also be really mindful of making sure their job recs are clarify that. What are we looking for? Who's the best fit for that job, etc. So don't just go on Indeed and hit apply to everything that has the word design or agency or marketing or anything after it, because that won't do you any service.
Yeah, I love that, and I completely agree with Greg. I mean, obviously, Greg is the man, the myth, the legend for many reasons, and that's clearly one of them right there. I couldn't agree more with what he just said. I think the one thing I would say on a different topic, not as a build or a disagreement to Greg, but I'll tell you a very real story. And there's actually someone on this call who can back this up. So one of the things I used to do when I was interviewing younger people that didn't have a lot of experience, and they came into the room and I could tell that they were very nervous. Like, our recruiter, Jamie, would say, hey, we're going to introduce you now to our chief creative officer, or whatever title of the day I've got. And one time I saw a very nervous candidate, and I actually ripped up the resume. And I said, I don't care what's on your resume. What I care about is, what are the things that you want to do in your career? And why did you, of all the companies that you could talk to, why are you talking to ours? And just be real with me as to what you do and don't know, and let's have a conversation. Ultimately, we ended up going out and hiring that person, because what I noticed was they were so afraid of what was on or wasn't on their resume. It was blocking their ability to solve problems. The one thing I want every young person that's watching this now or in the future to know is that me, Greg, and David, probably 90% of the time, have no idea what we're doing, right? We have to Google things just like you do. We have to figure things out just like you do. So the one thing I would say is that we're all clueless. right? And I've got a lot of experience and I've solved a lot of different problems, but so have you, right? Every person that's applying for a job has a perspective to bring to the table. So don't be afraid of what you do and don't have on your resume. Be afraid of not leaning into who you are, because the one thing that I don't want to hear when I'm interviewing somebody for a position, and I do a lot of interviewing with my teams, is I don't want to be bullshitted. I don't want to be told something that don't show me your portfolio and not tell me what your role was. If your role was research, don't show me great art direction like someone like Andre did and say that you did art direction. Because when I find out that you can't design that way, that's going to be the fastest way for me to walk you out than I walked you in, right? Tell me the truth, because I can deal with the truth. I can work with the truth. I can work with mistakes. But what I can't work with is someone who's not bringing their authentic self to the table on day one in that interview and on day 500 in the middle of a design meeting. And some of my team members are here today, so they can certainly hopefully expose that. I walk that walk as much as I talk that talk. So that's what I would say for everyone applying for the next job, because you know what? I've actually had 23-year-olds that direct photo shoots for us on our team, and they do a better job than 35 or 45-year-old creative directors. The difference is that they know what they are and they know what they're not. So don't let your imposter syndrome get in the way, because we all have it. I've got it, and I've been doing it for a very long time. So I just offer that up to you. That's real talk, and call me on that. Hit me up on Twitter, and I'll happily help you however I can.
That is so true. Just like Pete said, be yourself, be your authentic self, figure out what you're good at, and just learn everything else along the way. And it's great when we hear people in different areas with different expertise and with people that have years of expertise over the students to also say, hey, we're also figuring it out. We also have to ask questions. We also have to Google things. I know I say that to my students a lot, and sometimes I learn from them as well. And they teach me different things on the softwares, because, it's hard to keep up with all the updates. And then piggyback on what Greg said, for those of you, if any of you missed our first session with Jamie, she also touched on being intentional when you're applying to positions and not just click apply to every single job, because agencies are going to notice that. And they're going to notice that you're just applying for applying, but you're not really looking into the positions and being intentional about why you're good at that position. Why is that going to be the best fit for you? So thank you guys very much for all of that input. I am going to open up the floor for questions, because on the previous sessions, we sort of like cut the Q&A portion, and I want to make sure the students and the audience does get the opportunity to ask you guys stuff. So you have an amazing panel, everybody. So take this opportunity to pick their brain. Ask anything. You can raise your hand, you can put your question on the chat, or you can just turn on your mic, unmute yourself, and speak up.
While we're waiting on questions, I mean, I'd love to add to what you were just saying about, don't just apply. I was just thinking just now, I don't think I've ever gotten a job by applying online. And maybe I need to work on that. But what I do know is I'm good at communicating with people in person or over a Zoom call where I'm actually physically present. And, all my jobs, it was because I went and networked, the creative mornings, creative meetings. Every kind of city has different opportunities, and picking up the phone, calling people, sending physical letters to people, like finding some way to do more than just click apply. Like, it's not only don't apply to everyone, but if you have those 5 places you really want to work, you should invest a lot of time in how you're going to bypass the other 100, 200 candidates and stand out. And I think you have to be talented, of course. Your work's got to be good. But people want to work with good people, like nice people, honest people. And so if you can find a way to stand out and get your character across, your personality, you're going to really enjoy your career, I think, and you're really going to enjoy the people you get to work with.
Good point, David. I would also add to something that Pete said, which now I'm losing my train of thought because I piggyback on both of you. Pete, what you have to remind me of everything that you said in the last 20 minutes now.
I don't know. I feel like I've been talking for 20 minutes, so I don't know what. No.
Well, there is a question on the chat that sort of goes back to what David was saying. How do you get noticed by the agencies and get to the interview round?
I love that. Can I take that question?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm gonna tee that up to distract you while Greg thinks of what he catches his train of thoughts. I got your back, Greg. Tag teaming. So for one, thank you for asking that question. It's an awesome question. What I would say is most leaders, because of a big part of their position is inspiring, directing, and shaping talent, whether that talent be with their customers or with their work or with their teams, they tend to be outward facing. And again, don't confuse that with extrovert versus introvert. Believe it or not, I'm actually an introvert. I just play an extrovert pretty well on TV. But in all seriousness, people will tell you, to answer how do you get to the interview table, people will tell you what they want. Go look at the people that you want to work with. I say work with, not for, because I believe that servant leadership is really a important thing. But in all seriousness, find out what people care about. They might be posting on Twitter, they might be posting on their blog, on their websites, their company's websites. Identify and understand the problems that they're solving and that they're facing, and attempt to take a stab at solving that problem in a unique way. If you're a really talented print designer like David, send a physical printed artifact to someone's office. Obviously a bit harder now because of COVID with remote and everything. So face-to-face can be a bit challenging, but that's going to change. This is not forever. If you're a very talented UI UX designer and you find a UI UX problem that is standing in the way of you submitting, say, your resume, like, for example, like we really need to overhaul our career section on our website. It's, like most agencies, it's the last thing we look at is our site, but we got something coming for you soon. But in all seriousness, if there's a hole in the UX, redesign it and do an uninvited design. It doesn't have to be something that you spend a ton of time on. And ultimately, you can put that in your portfolio. You can take a stab at, hey, here's a problem I found, and we redesigned it. We recently did that for a client, right, Kelly? And it turned out that now we're launching an international kind of brand design project for a big client, all because we found a problem and we redesigned it. So I would say, if you want to get to the interview table, you have to stand out. And the way that you're not going to stand out is doing what David mentioned, is just filling out jobs online, right? Like he's obviously massively talented and people weren't hiring him. So if people aren't hiring him and we all see the talent he has, they're not going to hire someone who's right out of school. But what they will do is if you lean into the problem, if you message someone something and you're looking for some mentorship or you're looking for something, if you put that work in, I've often found that people will return that work and support you. And I don't know, Jamie, this is something that you do every day because you're essentially the gauntlet that people have to get past to for most companies. So maybe you can lend some pearls of wisdom as well.
Gatekeeper. I will say, Pete answers every email. That doesn't mean you all should email him, but he's really thoughtful and will always either pass it to me or answer. So there are small business owners, I think especially, who care about each and every person that enters the door, would really care about that thoughtful message that you might send. The people that tend to catch my eye when I'm recruiting are people who, like I mentioned in our first session, who are engaging with what we're talking about on Twitter, on LinkedIn, who are part of the community, who are on Dribble and, stoking each other up and paying it forward in whatever way. And it is all about doing that research. So you're sending a thoughtful message, and it's not just to whom it may concern. I saw that you're hiring a designer. I am a designer. Here is a link to my portfolio. But to say, Jamie, I just saw you at the AIGA event. That was awesome. I saw some of your colleagues, you really inspired me. I want to work together. You mentioned something about X. There's just something about tailoring the message, having your excitement come through, and then bridging the gap between what you do and what that company does, and saying I can help you. It's okay to pat yourself on the back. I saw a lot of messages, and I was chatting to people about imposter syndrome. As hiring managers, as recruiters, as business owners, we know if you're just graduating that you're not going to know it all. We totally get that. We're here because a lot of us want to mentor and help. So try and be confident in the work that you do and your skill set, and know that like we've been in your shoes. We have empathy, and we'll help you. We're not trying to test you or trick you. We will help you get through the process together.
Yeah, and just remember the like, one, you don't get responded to, or two, someone says no, right? The answer to every single question you will ever ask in life is no until you ask it. So I think that that's something that I think is really important for folks to lean into. And it disheartens me because I feel like universities right now don't set up their students for success. You know, they don't set their students up for success because they teach the theories, they teach the tools, they teach, you know, here's how you use Figma, Sketch, Photoshop, Illustrator, or whatever, but they don't teach like how to break down a design problem, show your work. Like, you know, we all took math class when we were younger, right? And if you just showed the teacher the right answer, they wouldn't let you just have the right answer. They wanted you to explain it. We want to know how you got to solving that problem. So don't show us just your portfolio. Show us a problem that you've solved that you want to help us solve. I often say to people, stop worrying about the title and start worrying about and telling people the problems you solve. So I'm not a creative director. I help businesses solve problems with creativity. Here's how I do it. Maybe I'll be a creative director one day. Maybe I'll be an intern today. But whatever that title is, I think it's being very clear. And I feel bad, right? Because I see that nervousness and I know what it feels like. And we feel it too as business owners, right? I walk in and pitch CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and I'm just as nervous as you are when you're interviewing with me, right? I'm like, I hope they hire my company. There's 50 other people pitching right now. Like, and I feel that same thing. And then we have to just turn it on, right? So that's just a muscle I think we can all develop. But I know, Greg, you do a ton of internal branding. And so you're in the heads of a lot of these big companies. When they're looking to hire young designers, what are some of the things that you're seeing that they really care about?
It's a lot of the same that we're talking about, from experience, and from, you know, being able to walk the walk and not just talk it. I think is really important. The recruiting that we do for agencies isn't creative specific. So the one thing I will say, this is where I was going before and lost my thought, was just before you tore up, or after you tore up the resume, Pete, you had said, all they want to know, all you want to know, and all agency owners want to know is, why are you there? Tell me why, like, you want to be here. And it's really helpful. Jamie said it too. You have to tailor that message. We all want to know. So you have to go in. And I said this to a few people I was just reviewing their portfolio, which is tailor and understand who you are going to apply for and be there for that reason. Be there because you know that they do UX and you like UX. Do that because you like branding and that's exactly what your passion is. And then get to that next step by solving a problem and doing all of those things. But if you're just blanketing out a really generic message of, I'm a good designer and come look at me, without having to say, like, I can create a relationship with you. We all want to be complimented. We all want to be, you know, sought after. And so pay that respect and we'll do the same back, right? And that's kind of where we also want to see that effort put together, because that effort that you're showing us in a first interview or first letter is immediately what we know is going to make you succeed within our agency.
Amen.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think what's really important to remember is, you know, these agency owners, you know, companies, wherever you want to work, they're just people. And typically, you know, with an agency or a studio, you know, I think we all started them because we saw an opportunity in the market to be a little different and do something a little different than what all the other studios were doing. And so that's how I run my practices. You know, I want to work with companies that I'm excited about. I want to do projects I'm excited about, and I want to be able to explore, you know, design in a way that interests me. And so from that point of view, you know, if someone came to me and is also interested in those things, I mean, they're going to be a great candidate to work with them, right? If you have very different ideas of design and want to do different stuff, then it's not going to be a good fit. And I think that's just important to remember. It's like, if you like their work and you like the way they do things, then, and you find that you do that similarly, then you're probably going to be a pretty good fit for that company.
And we're doing a lot of digging into DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and learning there's also an opportunity of being different that is also helpful. Different experiences add to what we want to bring in. So what I would say from where David was going, have a similar passion and a belonging that makes sense, but bring a different point of view. And I think that's like, it's so helpful, which is where you see all kinds of different companies having mixed teams together with engineers and with creative and culture and all these different things, because the end product has so much more thought and thinking and background and experiences. And all of that's happening through ethnicity and race and size and age and location. All of these different things are massively helping the success of companies.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point too, is like, I think I love what Pete was saying. He goes in front of these Fortune 500 companies and he feels like, how some of you just graduating might feel just going in for an interview. And it's also important to remember, like, my company's at a certain level compared to Pete and compared to Greg. We're much smaller, much newer. And so I also feel that imposter syndrome too sometimes when I'm trying to grow from small to medium to large size businesses, every level up as, you grow. It's always a challenge, but you have to be confident and move forward and just get over that feeling and know that, really be self-aware of who you are and what you want to do. And I think that's just the sooner you can get there, the happier, the more enjoyable your career is going to be, I think.
I want to ask a little bit more of a personal question. And it's, when did you guys realize what your passion was and how you decided to just focus on that passion or to develop it even more? So for example, with David, that his passion is branding and print. A little bit of a backstory, David was actually one of my students a few years ago, and he was in my interactive club web design class. My web class. He did not enjoy that class at all. And he was very open about it. And from then he knew, this is what I want to do. I'm taking this class because it's required for my degree, but this is what I love. This is my passion. This is what I'm going to focus on. And for over the years that I have known him, he really hasn't steered away from that passion. I believe he has only gotten even greater and greater. And he just keeps growing as this most amazing designer, and his business keeps growing. So how did that work with you guys, Pete and Greg?
Well, first, I'd love to hear how David honed in on such a passion and stuck with it, and did that as the Malcolm Gladwell quote is known for, said he put that 10,000 plus hours in that craft. So David, maybe you can kind of kick us off with, just Melanie obviously was just telling us a little bit about you. How did you find that passion? Because one of the things that I run into, it's a big struggle I have when talking to younger folks, is they don't necessarily have that passion. I'll answer Melanie's question in a second, but I just, while we're on the topic of David and the focused craft, I know my background's a little bit more spread out, as I think is Greg. So let's start maybe with the really focused, and then we'll sort of tackle Greg and my personal passions.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I'll try to condense it. I was actually telling one of the students in the portfolio review, kind of encouraging him, because he didn't really know where he wanted to go or what he wanted to do. And so, back when I was in college, I did 2 years at unaccredited music school. I did the music thing. I toured, I gigged, I was doing photography for a while, doing weddings and stuff. And, I got pretty far along in all these things. I started doing design. And I used to just I'd tell people, oh, I'm a musician, I'm a designer, I'm a photographer. But at some point you realize that you have to kind of pick one if you really want to go deep, if you really want to go far, if you really want to enjoy what you're doing. And so I fell in love with branding. I fell in love with design. I love the history of design. I feel like we're just kind of weaving, our narratives that are happening today, we're weaving them into the future of the history of design, which I think is just so cool. The fact that we can use typefaces that they're using 100 years ago still today in our designs, I think is really interesting. So I like that part of design. And then as far as branding, I think creatives kind of get scared. They want to have opportunity to explore all these things, so they don't want to niche too tight. But with branding, you get new industries, or even if it's the same industry, there's different locales that affect the, how the design is perceived, different languages. And you get to work with awesome people, other designers, copywriters, photographers, videographers. And so you're always meeting interesting people. And for me, that was why I fell in love with branding, is just all those opportunities, and the research portion of it.
That's awesome. I always wanted to stay really diverse. I didn't know exactly my specific passion. I loved branding. I started dabbling in web design. I started dabbling in all these different things and didn't want to be just the siloed, that's all I do, or posters or anything like that. And it was really what I figured out is I just love problem solving. And that was just, I love problem solving creatively and helping people. It was only recently that the agency, or my agency, started pivoting into employee experience, realizing how much of a need that is to help companies grow culture and retain talent and grow that. And the need was huge, still is. And so that's where we've focused. And it still comes. And again, you can look at any of us and it's still about problem solving. It's just a matter of scale. How big is it? How many people are you solving for? We'll never have billboards on the side of the freeway, but we solve them in very different ways that still improve people's lives. And that's all about that reward that I've just enjoyed. There's never, depending on what you really want to do, the self-gratification, whether it's immediate or long-term, you have to be patient with that or know where you really want to be, and find an agency. David might say, like, it could be 6 months before you see anything on a shelf, or no, it could be 2 weeks before this is actually done and finalized. And you'll see a different response from Pete and all kinds of different other agencies, whether you're in-house or at an agency. And that's also something to learn to appreciate when you're in school. You're like, oh, it's done in 2 weeks. Okay, great. Like, awesome. On to the next one. And you always have that gratification there. And kind of, that's also that self-awareness piece. That's to something to be mindful of too.
Yeah, no, I love that, Greg. That hits home in a lot of ways for me personally. So I'll tell my story to answer Melanie's question around just kind of what that passion was and how I found it. And I also saw some stuff popping up in the chat. So I'm going to sort of weave some of that into this because it's a big part of my story. So I ultimately went on to start Digital Surgeons, the creative consultancy, because I was sick and tired of being labeled. It's really common now for people to design and code. So I don't like the word or. I actually take the word or, like, whenever I hear the word or, for me, it's usually followed by a limiting belief that someone puts out there in the world for me or myself or someone else, right? So for me, I was being labeled at very large companies. I won't shame them or call them out here, but I was working at some very large companies as a designer, and the designers loved me because I could code their designs, and the developers loved me because I could deal with the designers, to use their language. So I was always a bit of a polymath. I always had a very, very wide set of skills, and most importantly, a wide set of passions, right? And I think that was really uncommon at the time. Someone was brave enough in the chat to put up a message about having a disability. I think what's really interesting is you might not recognize it, but some of the world's, if you look at the world's billionaire list, I've actually had the pleasure, there's a book on that bookcase over there that's signed by a UK billionaire who's dyslexic. So what the world considers disabilities, people who are on the spectrum or are coming from a number of different places, whatever those places might be, those create perspectives, those create opportunities, right? So we on our team have some people that grew up with learning disabilities, and I put those in quotes now because I think that to a certain degree, people don't understand the power that these different perspectives and these different approaches can lend themselves to solving problems. So for me, it was labels that helped me find my passion. People were saying, oh, you're this, you're a computer geek, or you're a design geek. Well, why can't I be both? So we have a thing that we talk a lot about at Digital Surgeons. It used to be on the big screens when we were in the office. Now remotely, we got to talk to Greg about some internal tools to kind of recreate the office. But all jokes aside, we used to have these large screens. We would feature an employee, and it would be like, what is their and it would have this big ampersand, and we would show like this person's a designer and a dad, and they also bake bread and play guitar on the weekends in like a jam band, right? So we want to look at the broad spectrum of who a person is. So for me, my passion was always solving problems creatively, and whether that was with multimedia. So I started my career with, I just loved seeing things animate. I wanted to be a game designer, right? I, like every kid, I love video games. So I wanted to learn how those things got made. So that's how I learned and taught myself coding. And then I wanted to figure out how interfaces worked in games. And that's how I ultimately got into web design and development. And then when you're in web design and development, you get exposed to marketing because you realize that no one's going to pay you $500,000 to make a really fancy spinning, jumping, animating website unless it actually sells their products or their services. Like Andre from our team was talking about earlier with that case study, so focused on business outcomes. Hopefully you're able to catch that. So I think my passion has always been, I think that creativity and curiosity are broken. If I can put those two things together and lean into my passions, which were at the time and still are design, technology, problem solving, that's where my passions went. So I think what that's like Greg, that's got me in some cases very, very wide. And I've had to sort of kind of call myself in to say, have I gotten deep enough in that topic yet? So what I've personally had success with is if there's something that I'm really passionate about, but I'm not an expert in, I'll make that my hobby first, and I'll nerd out on that, and I'll get it right on my own time and my own dime, and then I'll bring it to my clients. Because you never want to, I hate the term fake it till you make it. If there's one thing that I would strongly disencourage, do not fake it until you make it. Lean into what you do and don't know, lean into what you're passionate about, but never bullshit, because it'll always catch up with you. I hope that answers the question, Melanie.
Yes, that was an amazing answer. Thank you so much, everybody. Well, we do have a question in the chat that I want to get to, and is how can folks apply to a company again in the future once their skills and experience is improved? Is it okay to reapply at a company where you were previously rejected? And I don't know if I'm getting too much out of my way here, Jordan.
I was just going to say, Jordan.
But I was wondering if maybe you wanted to tackle that question.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you guys are amazing with your answers so far, so I gotta keep up with that.
So tell us a little bit about your story, Jordan. For people that don't know, Jordan now works at a company where he applied years ago for an internship and was rejected.
Yeah. So back when I was a sophomore in college, I thought I was hot stuff. I'm like, all right, I know everything I need to know. I'm doing well in my classes. This is it. So I applied for an internship at Digital Surgeons, and I talked with the interview guy for about an hour. Definitely
It wasn't me.
No, it was not. No. And I definitely didn't answer things correctly, because he was like, well, just make sure to read the case studies and stuff. I'm like, okay. And so I was waiting to hear back after that. I thought I did okay. I never got a call back. I reached back out, didn't hear anything from that either. But I was like, you know what? I'm gonna prove it to them that I can work my way, into this company, and kind of prove that I could get the experience and come back and really show that I learned something out in the real world. So I got an internship at another place and worked with Joey Nicholas over there on a team, and that was a lot of great experiences. I got out there and worked with a bunch of different Fortune 500 companies, and amazing smaller clients too, which can be, if not just more difficult, which is an amazing thing that I learned. Sometimes the small businesses are great to work with just because they pose a bigger challenge. But just coming back from it all, I was like, you know what? I'm going to shoot my shot back in February, because I was getting tired of doing the same old stuff over and over. And I was like, let me, the stars aligned a bit because there was a UX position, and that's what I tend to do. And I went for it. And to an earlier point that was brought up, the actual position asked for 8 years of experience, and I'm a little below that, but I was like, I thought I fit the other qualifications and just wanted to apply anyway. And, here we are, and made it. So I'm just really grateful to, I think, having gotten that no. Otherwise, I wouldn't have challenged myself the way I thought I needed to.
So many of us are visual people, so I'm not going to answer Melanie's question. I'm just going to show you the answer to Melanie's question. So if y'all could just
Oh,
y'all can
geez.
see my screen. Hopefully that answers the question. And you
Cool.
can see just like how many people welcomed him here. So yeah. So hopefully it answers the question to everyone asking it.
Yeah, my add to that would be, we will likely not keep resumes on file, and especially if your skill set's changed, apply again and say that, hey, you might have noticed I've, this is the second time applying, here's why, and let us know. Be personal, be interested, all of those things. We have what's called ATS, which is an applicant tracking system. Big companies have those sort of things, so they keep things on record. We surface the ones and we mark them as by stars, let's call it, right? So there's already some that are favorited or passed back and forth, or like, let's keep it on file if we're not hiring that moment, or we passed because of some reason. So we'll go back to those. But if your skill set changed and you weren't a match before, to Jordan's point, you grew a lot, then apply again and say why. Like, hey, you might have seen my resume a couple of years ago, but I've been at a couple of other places and I've learned X, Y, and Z. You're going to see me again, and here's why I think you should look again.
Yeah, that's a great point too, Greg. Something I learned later is, when you don't hear back, don't always assume it was because, it's something you did or something you weren't good enough. Sometimes things just don't align right, or it doesn't make sense. Because I've heard, a year or two later, after some of these agencies I applied to way back in the day, and I met them in person, like, oh yeah, you're David Gurr. Like, yeah, we loved your stuff. We just didn't have anything at the time, or whatever, or for whatever reason, it didn't work out. And you never really know. So definitely apply back, and if it's somewhere you really want to work for, or something you're passionate about.
Yeah, and people change too, right? Not just you as a person that's a practitioner and that's growing in your career, but also like who might be in charge of reviewing those resumes. I remember like one of the most humbling emails I got was when someone got a job. It was back when Yahoo was cool. Yahoo's not cool anymore, right? But someone had applied for an internship, and we were much smaller at the time. I think we were like maybe 10 people. And I remember seeing it, and like Jamie mentioned before she had to jump, I responded to it, and I was like, here's the reasons why you weren't selected for this internship, due to this. And I gave them a couple of, generic answers, but then I gave them a couple of very specific answers based on some things that were there. Ultimately, about 6 months later, I got a message from this person on email, and they were like, hey, thanks so much for your email. It really moved me to change this one thing in my portfolio, et cetera, et cetera. And now I'm working at Yahoo as a UX designer, and they were like super great, grateful for it. And that's a person that now still to this day I'm connected to. We're in each other's networks, and there might be an opportunity for us to collaborate in some way, shape, or form. They could become a client for us one day, or whatever it is. So I would say, don't assume that just because you're sending something, no matter how good it might be, that the person's seeing it. Or also, I recall like Andre showed a couple of really great pieces of work. I find that whenever we put a bunch of great work out, we get so many resumes. Sometimes it's just overwhelming for a very small team of people. Typically it's 1 or 2 people on our team that's looking at, 100, 200, 300, forms that oftentimes look the same. So I would just offer up, like, don't assume that what you sent, it's because of anything you said or didn't say. It could just be, we're busy and we didn't get a chance to see it. So as I think David and Greg were saying earlier, find a different doorway in, right? If the door's closed, find a window, and if the window's closed, kick the door in. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. I'm gonna go with one last question because we are 5 minutes short to our next session. But somebody asked, if a company doesn't tell you or give you feedback about why they're not hiring you, what are the rules of etiquette for asking, or can you even ask?
For sure. Yeah, simple answer. Ask, like, hey, is there something that I'm missing or something I can improve upon? Is completely appropriate. Not usually done over email. It's a little harder to do that, but assuming that you have the opportunity of meeting with somebody and making a connection, and whether it's done in person or as a follow-up, Hey, we met last week. I just wanted to follow up on that job. And they've come back and say, oh, we filled that with another candidate. Ask why. Hey, is there a reason why? Is there something, that I could have done? And there's absolutely a reason. And that's usually experience, different qualifications. There's a number of things, but it can only help you. So learn from it.
Great. Thank you again so much, Greg, Pete, David. Thank you for being in the portfolio reviews as well. Everybody, you will have a short 2-3 minute break, and we'll come back at 5 o'clock with Tyler.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time and attention. And, as Greg, myself, and David said, if there's anything that any of us might be able to offer up, many of us are pretty active on LinkedIn and Twitter and whatnot. So please get in touch. Again, we're happy to help and answer questions or whatever, or do whatever we can, because we were in your shoes at one point and some of us are still in your shoes. So with that, have a great rest of the day. That next session sounds like a really awesome thing in terms of building that presence.
Yeah, this is really great. Thanks for having us, Melanie. I'm going to drop my email in the chat if anyone wants to reach out. Add me on LinkedIn.